My mother waited until the ham was carved, the macaroni and cheese was passed around, and all 35 relatives crammed into her small living room had full plates before she decided to destroy Christmas. She stood at the head of the table, clinked her fork against her favorite crystal glass, the one she only brought out when she wanted everyone's undivided attention, and announced, "Before we get to dessert, there's something the whole family needs to hear." I was squeezed between my grandmother Helen and my cousin Marcus, still chewing a forkful of scalloped potatoes. I remember that detail because I never got to finish them. What she said next would have been devastating in private. She said it in front of 35 people on Christmas Day with disposable plates and plastic utensils, and my homemade honey-glazed ham still steaming in the center of the table. And what my father added afterward was somehow even worse. Welcome back to Quiet Justice Tales. I'm Sarah, and I'm 34 years old. This is the story of the Christmas my mother gave me an impossible choice in front of our entire extended family, and the 118 phone calls that flooded my phone over the following week. If you've ever been the one everyone turns to when something needs fixing, the one they call at 2 a.m. but forget to include in the family photos, please stick around, drop a comment, and subscribe. To understand that Christmas, I need to take you back to Clayton, North Carolina, a small town about 25 minutes southeast of Raleigh. I grew up in a modest 1,300 square foot ranch house on Maple Street with a chain-link fence and a magnolia tree in the front yard that bloomed every May like it was trying to compensate for the rest of the neighborhood's mediocrity. My father, Robert, drove a delivery truck for a local building supply company. Left at 5:30 a.m., home by 6 p.m., his hands always smelling like sawdust and diesel fuel. My mother, Diane, worked the register at a craft store on Main Street. She could identify the fabric content of any material just by touching it, a useful skill that unfortunately didn't pay well. We weren't destitute. We had food on the table, central heating, and a reliable sedan that got us where we needed to go. But there was never anything extra. No family vacations, no summer camps, no orthodontia until I was 16, and only then because the dentist agreed to a payment plan. What we did have was my mother's constant refrain. She said it so often it became background noise, like the hum of the refrigerator or the ticking of the living room clock. Someday my girls are going to have the wedding I never got. Here's what she meant by that. Diane married Robert when she was just 18 years old. A quick ceremony at the county clerk's office on a rainy Wednesday morning. She wore a beige dress she'd borrowed from her sister. No flowers, no photographer, no reception to speak of. Robert's mother didn't attend because she disapproved of the match. Diane's parents showed up but left immediately afterward to get back to their farm. I discovered the photos once, buried at the bottom of her nightstand drawer beneath a tattered phone book and an old heating pad. 2 faded Polaroids. She looked young, terrified, and clinging to a fragile thread of hope. Robert looked like he'd borrowed his jacket from someone with broader shoulders. 37 years later, she was still carrying that courthouse wedding around like a splinter she couldn't remove. And somewhere along the way, she decided that her daughters would be the ones to finally make things right. I became a nurse not because anyone in my family pushed me toward it, since nobody in my family had ever been to college, but because I watched a firefighter revive a child at a car accident scene when I was 15 and thought, I want to be able to do that. East Carolina University, for years, working the overnight shift at a diner off Highway 70 to pay for textbooks. Graduated, passed the NCLEX, got hired at WakeMed Hospital in Raleigh, working in the intensive care unit, the floor where patients are either recovering or declining, and you find out which one it's going to be during your shift. I loved it. I was good at it. I was also, without realizing it, becoming the family's designated problem solver. It happened the way most traps do, one small concession at a time. My mother's blood pressure medication needed to be picked up every month from the pharmacy in Clayton, because she refused to transfer her prescription anywhere else. I did it 5 years, 60 trips. My father needed his taxes done every April. I taught myself the software and filed them for him. 8 years, saving him roughly $6,500 in accounting fees he would never have paid anyway because he would have simply ignored the deadline. My grandmother Helen, my father's mother, was 83 years old, sharp as a tack but with a bad hip, living in an assisted living facility in Clayton. I was her emergency contact. 3 times in the past year, I drove 40 minutes in the middle of the night because she'd fallen or her oxygen monitor had gone off. I organized every holiday gathering, every Thanksgiving bird, every Christmas roast, every Easter egg hunt for the cousins' children. I ended a 3-year relationship during the pandemic because I chose 14-hour ICU shifts over date nights. And my boyfriend got tired of eating dinner alone. I was 34, single, financially stable, and the most dependable person in a family that had started confusing dependability with obligation. My sister Chloe was 7 years younger than me and inhabited a completely different universe. Not a bad universe, just different. She was 27, effortlessly attractive in a way that made strangers offer to help her carry her shopping bags. And she worked at a boutique in Raleigh called Lily and Oak, selling overpriced candles and linen trousers. She was close to my mother in a way I never was. They talked every day, texted about television shows, went to the craft store together on Saturday mornings. I wasn't jealous. I was an ICU nurse. I didn't have time for jealousy, and I certainly didn't have the energy to pretend that $40 candles were interesting. Then Chloe met Daniel. Daniel was 30, soft-spoken, always wore a baseball cap, and drove a pickup truck that was suspiciously clean for someone who supposedly used it for work. His family owned a chain of auto dealerships across central North Carolina, the kind of wealth that doesn't broadcast itself. His parents, Richard and Patricia, were genuinely warm people. They welcomed Chloe like she'd been part of their family for years. Dinners at their lake house, a standing invitation to Sunday brunch. When Daniel proposed on a Saturday in April, on their favorite hiking trail, with a ring that caught the sunlight like it had its own internal fire, Diane cried. Not just happy tears, something more profound, something that had been fermenting for 37 years. I watched her face at the engagement party the Brennans hosted at their home, and I saw it clearly. The moment she stopped viewing Chloe's wedding as Chloe's wedding and started viewing it as her own. The do-over, the redemption, the proof that her life hadn't been a waste of a Tuesday morning in a borrowed dress. I should have paid closer attention to that look. But I was busy refilling the punch bowl, because that's what I did. The wedding plans materialized like a summer storm, slowly at first, then all at once. By August, my mother had assembled a binder 3 inches thick, organized with color-coded tabs. She presented it to me over Labor Day weekend like a general unveiling a military strategy, and the figures landed on me one after another. Venue: a converted barn outside Chapel Hill with string lights and a ceremony meadow. $29,000. Flowers: peonies, garden roses, cascading greenery for every table and the archway. $12,500. A live band, not a DJ, because Diane had heard a DJ at a cousin's wedding in 2018, and declared it tacky. $9,000. Chloe's dress from a bridal boutique in Durham. $6,500. Photography and videography both, because what's the point of having the wedding Diane never had if you don't document every single angle? $9,500. Catering for 200 guests at $95 per head. $19,000. Custom invitations, linens, napkins, table runners, signage, a calligrapher for the seating chart. $5,500. Hair and makeup for the bridal party of 6. $3,800. Miscellaneous, alterations, tips, transportation, hotel room blocks. $2,700. Grand total, $96,000. I stared at the number. The average American wedding costs around $35,000. This was nearly 3 times that. Where is all this money coming from? I asked. It was the only logical question. My parents had saved $16,000. Robert told me that himself, quietly, while Diane was in the kitchen. 16 from 96 left a shortfall of $80,000. Nobody said who was supposed to cover it. Nobody said anything at all. Just smiles and binder tabs and the unspoken assumption that someone would figure it out. Someone always did. September Labor Day weekend. I drove down to Clayton for the cookout, because that's what I did. Showed up, brought potato salad, helped Robert clean the grill. The yard smelled like charcoal and citronella, and whatever cinnamon-scented plug-in Diane had bought on sale. Normal, except it wasn't. The hints started small, the way a foundation crack starts small. Over burgers. Sarah, did you know ICU nurses in Raleigh can make almost $90,000 a year? During dessert. The whole family is going to pitch in. That's how families work. Everyone contributes what they can. While I was washing dishes, because I was always washing dishes, Diane leaned against the counter and said, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, "You've always been so good with money, Sarah. No debt, no mortgage. That's smart. That means you have options." I didn't respond. I kept scrubbing the casserole dish and let the faucet run loudly. Robert was in the living room, recliner, football game on. As I walked past him to leave, he patted my arm and said, "Your mother's got big plans. She's really excited." His voice had that careful, measured flatness I'd learned to recognize over the years. The voice he used when he was agreeing with Diane, not because he believed her, but because disagreeing would cost more energy than he had left. I drove the 40 minutes back to Raleigh that night, telling myself I was overthinking things. Diane was enthusiastic. She'd always been enthusiastic about weddings. This was her dream, not a scheme. I was an ICU nurse. I looked for problems the way other people looked for parking spaces. I told myself to relax. I remember the exact stretch of Interstate 40, where I almost convinced myself. Almost. Because somewhere beneath the rationalizing, I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Thanksgiving, the Owens family tradition. Too much food, not enough chairs, and the gradual unveiling of whatever drama had been brewing since the last holiday gathering. This year, Chloe brought her laptop to show venue photos during dessert. The barn was stunning. Warm wood, twinkling lights, a grand stone fireplace. Everyone oohed and awed. I said it was beautiful because it was. Then during cleanup, Chloe cornered me in the kitchen. I was rinsing the gravy boat. She was leaning against the refrigerator with her arms crossed, and she had that expression, the one she got when she wanted something and had already convinced herself she deserved it. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Daniel's parents offered to pay for the wedding. The whole thing." I set the gravy boat in the drying rack, and Mom said no. I turned off the faucet. She told Daniel's parents that the Owens family handles its own affairs. She said we didn't need outside help. "What does that mean for me, Chloe?" She didn't flinch. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You make good money, Sarah, and you don't have a husband or kids to spend it on. It's just math." Just math. As if my life was a spreadsheet that added up to available resources. As if the absence of a spouse and children wasn't the result of choices I'd made, sacrifices I'd endured, but simply a vacancy, an empty room in a house built for other people's belongings. I set the dish towel on the counter. I didn't fold it. I didn't throw it. I just set it down, picked up my keys from the hook by the door, and walked out. I drove back to Raleigh that night without saying goodbye to anyone. Chloe texted at 11:30 p.m. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. December arrived like a freight train. The ICU was brutal. Flu season, RSV, a staffing crisis that turned 12-hour shifts into 16. I worked Christmas Eve, coding a patient at 2 a.m., losing another at 6 o'clock. By the time I clocked out, my scrubs smelled like antiseptic and grief. Robert called that week. Careful voice, rehearsed words. "Your mother is planning something special for Christmas. She wants everyone there. All 35 of us. It's important to her." "I'll come," I said. Of course I'd come. That's what I did. I bought gifts for everyone. I spent 2 days off wrapping them at my kitchen table in Raleigh with a glass of wine and Frank Sinatra playing in the background because I was sentimental about Christmas, even when Christmas wasn't sentimental about me. A cashmere scarf for Diane, forest green, her favorite color. A mechanic's tool set for Robert, high quality, because his old set was missing half its pieces. A pearl necklace for Chloe, not genuine pearls but lovely ones, with a card that said "for the bride." Because despite everything she'd said in that kitchen, she was still my sister. Oatmeal raisin cookies for Grandma Helen, baked from her own recipe, a double batch in a tin I'd decorated myself. I loaded the car on Christmas Eve. A 20-pound ham in the cooler, brined overnight. Green bean casserole in a glass dish on the passenger seat. Cranberry sauce from scratch. Sweet tea 2 gallons. I drove 40 minutes to Clayton in the dark, singing along to the radio, carrying food and gifts into a house where 35 people were waiting. I didn't know I was wrapping presents for people who were preparing an ambush. I didn't know I was brining a ham for my own trial. Christmas Day. The ranch house was loud, overheated, and decorated with excessive enthusiasm. Diane had outdone herself. Garlands on every surface, a wreath on every door. A massive fir tree in the corner strung with lights and the homemade ornaments we'd made as children. 35 relatives crammed into a house designed for maybe a dozen. Folding tables set end to end through the living room and into the hallway. Disposable plates, plastic cups, the good crystal glasses for the adults. Kids running, dogs barking, Uncle Frank telling the same story about the fish he caught in 1992. I did what I always did. Set the ham on the table, heated the casserole, poured wine for the aunts, made sure Grandma Helen had a comfortable chair with a clear path to the bathroom, refilled the sweet tea pitcher 3 times. Nobody asked me to. Nobody needed to. There was an undercurrent, though. I felt it the way you feel a drop in barometric pressure before a thunderstorm. Nothing visible, just a heaviness. Diane kept exchanging glances with Robert across the table. Quick looks, loaded with meaning. Robert would nod slightly, then look away. Chloe was dressed up more than usual, nicer blouse, curled hair, fresh manicure. She was fidgeting with her engagement ring, spinning it around her finger. Daniel sat beside her, quiet and uncomfortable. He had the look of someone who'd been told to be somewhere, but hadn't been told why. His knee bounced under the table. He barely ate. Diane barely ate either. She kept glancing at the clock on the wall above the television. 6:08 p.m., 6:12, 6:15. She was waiting for something. Or more accurately, she was waiting for everyone to finish eating, so she could begin whatever she'd been planning since November, maybe longer. Probably much longer. The plates were mostly cleared. Diane's apple pie sat on the counter, untouched. She stood, smoothed her blouse, picked up her fork, and tapped it against her crystal glass. 3 sharp rings that cut through the noise like a surgical instrument. The room went quiet in waves, children first, then adults. Uncle Frank stopped mid-sentence. Grandma Helen looked up from her plate. "Before we have pie," Diane announced, "there's a family matter I need to discuss." She smiled, that rehearsed smile that had lost all its warmth years ago. She looked directly at me. "As you all know, Chloe and Daniel are getting married in June. Robert and I have been planning something truly special. We've saved $16,000, and it's a good start, but we need the family to come together." She paused, took a breath, and dropped the number like a bomb. "The total cost is $96,000. We're asking Sarah to help cover the difference." 35 faces turned toward me. Forks stopped midair. I could hear the Christmas tree lights buzzing. "You're asking me?" I said slowly, making sure I understood correctly. "To pay $80,000 for Chloe's wedding?" "I'm not asking," Diane said. Her voice rose, her chin lifted. She had the look of a woman who'd convinced herself that volume was the same thing as righteousness. "This is family, Sarah. This is what family does." She scanned the room, gathering witnesses the way a prosecutor gathers a jury. And then she said the words I would replay in my mind for the next 6 months. "Pay for your sister's wedding or consider yourself cut off from this family forever." She said it loudly. She said it clearly. And she said it in front of every person I'd ever shared a holiday with. The silence after my mother's ultimatum lasted just long enough for me to look at my father. Robert was sitting at the other end of the table. And when Diane finished, he did something I will never forget. He half stood, not all the way, just enough to plant his palms on the table and push himself up so everyone could see him. So his voice would carry over the disposable plates and the plastic cups and the remnants of the holiday meal. He scanned the room slowly, making eye contact with aunts, uncles, cousins, challenging anyone to object. Then he looked at me. "Your mother and I discussed this," he said. His voice was flat, steady, rehearsed, the voice of a man who'd practiced his lines in front of a bathroom mirror. "Nobody here disagrees. This is your responsibility." Nobody here disagrees. One sentence that transformed 35 relatives into a jury. One declaration that made their silence a verdict. I looked around the room. Aunt Patricia stared at her lap. Uncle Frank studied his fork, as if it contained the secrets of the universe. My cousin Marcus suddenly found the Christmas tree decorations fascinating. No one spoke. No one objected. No one said, "Hold on, Diane. That's not fair." Grandma Helen was in her wheelchair by the window. I saw her grip the armrests. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there, anger perhaps, or heartbreak. But she didn't speak. She was 83 years old and afraid of her daughter-in-law. And I understood that because everyone in that room was afraid of my mother. Chloe held Daniel's hand under the table. Daniel's face had gone pale. His lips were pressed together. He hadn't known. I could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders. He was hearing this for the first time, just like me. The silence stretched like a rubber band, and I could feel it about to snap. I stood up slowly, the way you stand when you want everyone to watch. I picked up my napkin, folded it once, and placed it beside my plate. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't explain why $80,000 was impossible, or why the demand was outrageous, or why my own mother had just humiliated me in front of every person whose name I'd written on a Christmas card 2 weeks earlier. I simply said one word. No. It came out quiet, firm, the kind of quiet that fills a room more than shouting ever could. I pushed my chair back, picked up my purse from the floor, walked to the hook by the front door, and took my coat, the same coat I'd been wearing when I carried the 20-pound ham in 4 hours earlier. No one moved. No one followed. I could feel 35 pairs of eyes on my back. As I opened the screen door, the hinges groaned. Cold air hit my face. December in North Carolina isn't brutal, but it's sharp, and that night it was 36 degrees, and the Christmas lights on the porch were blinking red and green in a pattern that suddenly seemed obscene. I got in my car and sat there for 2 minutes. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. I gripped the steering wheel and breathed the way I taught panicking patients to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. The ham was still on the table. My gifts were still under the tree. The cashmere scarf, the tool set, the pearl necklace, the oatmeal cookies in the hand-painted tin. I'd driven 40 minutes to bring food and love into that house. And I was leaving with nothing but my coat and the echo of one word still vibrating in my chest. I drove back to Raleigh in the dark. I cried the whole way. I did not pull over. One word. No. If you know what it costs to say that word to your own mother, if you've ever walked out of a room full of people who were supposed to love you, type, "I understand" in the comments, because what happened next wasn't silence. It was a deluge. The calls started before I even crossed the county line. My phone lit up on the passenger seat like a small, relentless bonfire. By the time I parked at my apartment in Raleigh, 40 minutes after leaving that table, I had 16 missed calls. 5 from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from Chloe, 1 from Aunt Patricia, and 5 from numbers I didn't recognize. Relatives, probably recruited to the cause before the pie was even served. Day 1 after Christmas, Mom called 7 times, Dad 4, Chloe 3, Aunt Patricia once, 3 more unknowns. 18 calls total. Day 2, 52. Day 3, 71. Day 4, 96. Day 5, 103. Day 6, 115. By day 7, New Year's Day, 118 calls in a single day. I know the exact numbers because I logged every single one. Occupational habit. When you work in intensive care, you document everything, every medication, every vital sign, every change in condition. I kept a spiral notebook on my kitchen counter, the same kind I use for patient notes, and I recorded every call, every voicemail, every text, date, time, caller, duration. The voicemails were their own category, 58 total by the end of the first week. Diane's evolved fastest. Day 1 fury. You embarrassed this family, Sarah. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Day 2 guilt. I raised you better than this. Day 3, ultimatum recycled. This is your last chance. Roberts were shorter. Call your mother, Sarah. This isn't going away. She's not eating. Chloe's were mostly crying, just sobbing in silence, and then a click. Aunt Patricia left one. Sarah, honey, just call them back. This can be worked out. It couldn't. But Patricia didn't know that yet. 3 days after Christmas, I was sitting on my couch in sweatpants, eating cereal out of the box, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected number. Patricia Brennan, Daniel's mother. Sarah, I heard there's been some difficulty. Could we have coffee? Just us. No agenda. I almost didn't go. But Patricia had always been kind to me, genuinely kind, not the performative kind that evaporates when it's inconvenient. And something about the way she phrased it told me she knew more than she was letting on. We met at a coffee shop in Cary Neutral Ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 lattes already ordered. She looked uncomfortable, not guilty, confused. Sarah, I need to show you something, she said. She unlocked her phone and turned the screen toward me. It was an email chain. 2 messages. The first was from Patricia to my mother, sent October 25th. Dear Diane, Richard and I would be honored to host the wedding for Chloe and Daniel. Please let us cover the costs as our gift to them. We want this to be a joyful time for everyone. The second was my mother's reply, sent November 1st, 7 days later, from diane.owens.clayton@gmail.com. Thank you for the generous offer, but the Owens family takes care of our own celebrations. Sarah will be assisting us with the expenses. No need for outside involvement. I read it twice, then a third time. November 1st, 7 weeks before Christmas. My mother had already decided I would pay. She just hadn't told me yet. She'd announced it to strangers, to the groom's family, to people I'd never discussed my finances with. 7 weeks before she stood at that table and delivered her ultimatum. I sat in the coffee shop parking lot for 20 minutes after Patricia left. Engine off, phone in my lap, open to the screenshot I'd taken of that email. I read it again. Sarah will be assisting us with the expenses. Not might. Not we're planning to ask. Will be. Present tense. Done deal. My mother had committed my money, my $78,000 a year, my 16-hour shifts, my missed holidays and skipped vacations and $3 coffees, to someone else's wedding without asking me. She'd announced it to Daniel's parents like she was confirming a catering order. And the rejection itself, that was the part that kept turning over in my mind like a gear that wouldn't stop. Patricia and Richard had offered to cover everything, $96,000, a gift, no conditions, the kind of generosity most families would be overwhelmed to receive. And Diane said no. Not because she was proud in some noble, self-sufficient way. If it had been pride, she would have scaled the wedding down to what she and Robert could afford. $16,000 buys a perfectly lovely wedding, even a beautiful one. But she didn't want lovely. She wanted $96,000 worth of proof that her life had mattered. And she wanted to control every detail. That's what the refusal was about. Control. If the Brennans paid, the Brennans got a say. If Sarah paid, Diane kept everything, the venue, the flowers, the guest list, the narrative. No need for outside involvement. She called the groom's own parents, the family her daughter was marrying into, outside. I screenshotted the email, saved it to my phone, emailed it to myself, saved it to cloud storage. Occupational habit again. When the patience chart is the only thing standing between the truth and a lawsuit, you learn to document everything twice. The calls didn't stop. They changed shape, like a storm changing direction. Same energy, different destruction. Days 8 through 10, 96, 112, 118. The voicemails evolved. Diane shifted from fury to pleading, which was somehow worse because fury I could handle. I'd been handling it my whole life. But my mother's voice breaking on a voicemail at 11 p.m. saying, "Please don't throw your family away over money, Sarah," made me sit on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and stare at the ceiling. Robert's messages got shorter and more desperate. "Your mother won't eat. She's lost 5 pounds. Call her." Chloe texted once. The message that cut deepest. "If you don't pay, there is no wedding. Is that what you want?" As if the entire event depended on my bank account. As if I were the villain standing between my sister and her happiness. Diane left a voicemail on day 10 that I've listened to exactly once and will never listen to again. She recycled the exact words from Christmas dinner. "Pay for your sister's wedding or consider yourself cut off forever." Except this time, her voice cracked on forever. And I could hear Robert in the background saying, "Tell her, Diane. Tell her." New Year's Eve. I worked the ICU shift because single nurses without kids always work the holidays. Midnight came and went between a ventilator alarm and a medication check. During my break, I sat with a patient, a woman in her 70s recovering from a stroke. She'd been watching me all night with clear, steady eyes. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "Family stuff," I replied. She nodded. Families are the people who show up, not the ones who send invoices. I wrote it on a napkin and tucked it into my scrub pocket. Mid-January. The phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, my day off, which meant I was planning to sleep until noon. Except it was Grandma Helen's number, the landline at Magnolia Pines Assisted Living in Clayton. I answered because I always answered for Helen. "Sarah." Her voice was thin but sharp like a wire pulled tight. "Don't hang up." "I wasn't going to hang up, Grandma." "Good. Because I need to say something, and I've been practicing it for 3 weeks, and if I don't say it now, I'll lose my nerve." I sat up in bed, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, and waited. "I didn't say anything at that dinner," she said. "I sat there in my wheelchair and watched your mother humiliate you. And I didn't say a single word. I was afraid of her. I've been afraid of her for 30 years, and I'm ashamed of that." I could hear her breathing. "But you did the right thing, Sarah. You hear me? You did the right thing. Your mother's afraid of losing control. She's been afraid of that since the day she married your father in that courthouse and decided the world owed her a do-over. Don't let her make you small to keep herself big." I broke. I'm not someone who cries easily. Working in the ICU will train that out of you quickly. But I broke. Ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere below my ribs. Somewhere I'd been keeping everything locked since Christmas night. Helen waited. She didn't say it's okay or don't cry. She just breathed on the other end of the line, steady as a heartbeat. When I was done, she said one thing. "When this is over, come visit me. Bring cookies." "What kind?" "The oatmeal ones. You know that." "I promise." Then I sat on my kitchen floor for 10 minutes and let the quiet hold me.